Have you ever felt like your life was completely hopeless? Like everything around you was falling apart, and no matter how hard you tried, nothing seemed to change. Maybe you've been through seasons where you felt spiritually dry, like your faith has no life left in it. If you ever felt this way, then the Valley of Dry Bones is a story you need to hear. In the book of Ezekiel 37, the prophet Ezekiel is taken to a valley full of dry, lifeless bones, a place of death, despair, and hopelessness. But then something incredible happens. God tells Ezekiel to speak to the bones, and right before his eyes, they start coming back to life. But what does this vision mean? And more importantly, what does it mean for us today? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see how this story is not just about ancient Israel, it's about you. Let's set the scene. Ezekiel was a prophet during a dark time in Israel's history. The Israelites had been taken captive by the Babylonians. Their homeland was destroyed, their temple was gone, and they had lost all hope. They felt like God had abandoned them. Then, in a vision, God takes Ezekiel to a valley. And what does he see? Not just bones, but dry bones. It's an important detail. These bones weren't just from people who had recently died. They'd been dead for a long time. No flesh, no life, just dust and dryness. Then God asks Ezekiel a strange question. Son of man, can these bones live? Now let's pause for a second. Imagine standing in a desert filled with thousands of skeletons. If God asked you if they could come back to life, what would you say? I mean, logically the answer is no, but Ezekiel's smart. Instead of doubting, he responds, "Oh Lord God, you know." He's basically saying, I don't know, but you do. And that's when God tells Ezekiel to do something truly shocking. God commands Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones. Now imagine how ridiculous that must have seemed. Speaking of bones, telling them to come alive. But Ezekiel obeys. As he speaks, something incredible happens. The bones start moving and coming together. Tendons, muscles, and skin begin forming over them. Suddenly, instead of dry bones, they're now bodies lying in the valley. But there's a problem. Even though they look alive, they have no breath. So God tells Ezekiel to prophesy again, this time to the wind or breath, which in Hebrew is ruach, meaning both breath and spirit. Ezekiel speaks and God's breath enters them. And just like that, they come to life, standing up as a vast army. Can you imagine that? It's an incredible transformation. But what does it actually mean? God explains the vision to Ezekiel. These bones are the people of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up and our hope is gone, but I will bring you back to life. This vision was a promise to Israel. Even though they felt dead and hopeless, God wasn't finished with them. But here's where it gets powerful. This story isn't just about ancient Israel, it's about us. There are times in life when we feel like those dry bones, spiritually empty, disconnected from God, just going through the motions, emotionally drained, worn out by life's struggles and disappointments, physically exhausted, feeling like we have nothing left to give. And in those moments, we ask the same question. Can these bones live? Can my faith be restored? Can my marriage be healed? Can my dreams come back to life? And God's answer is yes. But here's the key. New life doesn't come from us. It comes from God. The story of Ezekiel in the Valley of Dry Bones isn't just an incredible vision. It's a message of hope, restoration, and transformation. But what does it mean for you and me today? Well, let's break down the key lessons and how they apply to real life. Number one, no situation is too hopeless for God. One of the most striking details in this story is that the bones weren't just dead. They were dry. This means they had been dead for a long time. From a human perspective, they were beyond saving. And yet God asks Ezekiel a question. Can these bones live? Well, the obvious answer would be no, but Ezekiel responds wisely, "Oh Lord God, you know." What this means for us? There are times in life where we feel completely hopeless. Maybe your faith feels dead, like you're just going through the motions, but there's no passion anymore. Maybe your marriage or relationships feel beyond repair. Maybe you've prayed for something for years and nothing seems to change. Maybe your dreams feel like they've died before they ever had a chance to grow. The message of Ezekiel 37 is this: nothing is beyond God's power to restore. Even when something looks completely lifeless, God can bring it back to life. So the next time you feel like your situation is too far gone, remember this story. God is still asking the question, can these bones live? And the answer is yes, because nothing is impossible for him. Number 2, what you speak over your life matters. God could have restored the bones instantly, but instead, he told Ezekiel to prophesy over them. In other words, Ezekiel had to speak life before he saw life. Think about that. God didn't tell Ezekiel to wait and see. He told him to declare what would happen before there was any sign of change. What this means for us, there's a powerful lesson here. What you speak over your life matters. What you declare over your future shapes your reality. Your words have power, so use them wisely. If all you do is say, things will never change, I'll never be successful, God's forgotten me, then you're reinforcing that reality. But if you start speaking God's promises over your situation, even before you see change, things will begin to shift. Even when you don't feel it, start declaring, God is restoring me. I will not stay in this dry place forever. God's plan for my life is still in motion. This is faith in action. Ezekiel spoke before he saw the miracle, and you can do the same. Number 3, spiritual life comes from God, not just effort. When Ezekiel first prophesied, the bones came together. Flesh and skin covered them, but they weren't truly alive yet. Why? Because they had no breath, and breath, ruach in Hebrew, represents the Spirit of God. God told Ezekiel to prophesy again, this time to the breath, and when he did, the bodies finally came to life. What this means for us, this is so powerful because it shows us that we have everything in place externally, but without God's Spirit, we're still empty. Think about it. You can have money and success, but still feel lifeless inside. You can have a full schedule, but an empty heart. You can look fine on the outside, but be struggling internally. True life doesn't come from just doing more. It comes from being filled with God's Spirit. If you feel spiritually dry, don't just try to fix things on your own. Instead, ask God to fill you again. Because real life comes from His Spirit, not just from external changes. Number 4, God's timing is not our timing. The Israelites were in exile when Ezekiel had this vision. They'd lost their land, their temple, and their identity. They probably thought, well, if God is going to save us, He would have done it by now. But here's the thing. God had a plan, even when they couldn't see it. What this means for us, sometimes we don't see an answer right away. We assume God isn't working. But just because God is silent doesn't mean He's absent. Maybe you've been praying for something for years, and it hasn't happened yet. Maybe you feel like time's running out and God's taking too long. But remember, God's timing is perfect. The bones don't come to life until God said the time was right. So if you're still waiting, don't give up. God's delays are not denials. He's working behind the scenes. Number 5, revival begins with one step of faith. Imagine if Ezekiel had looked at the valley of bones and said, "This is pointless," and refused to speak. Nothing would have happened. Instead, he obeyed, even when it didn't make sense. And that's when the miracle started. What this means for us, maybe right now you feel stuck. You know, you need a change, but you don't know where to start. Here's the key. Start with where you are. Take one step of faith. Obey what God is asking you to do. Even if you don't see results immediately, keep going. Speak life over your situation. Choose faith over fear. Trust that God is working behind the scenes. Revival doesn't start with a perfect plan. It starts with a step of obedience. Your dry bones can live again. So let's bring it back to you. Where in your life do you feel like dry bones? Your faith? Your relationships? Your purpose? Your joy? The message of Ezekiel 37 is clear. It's not over. God can restore what seems lost. He can bring life to what seems dead. He can fill you with His Spirit again. But it starts with faith, believing that if He could bring an entire valley of dry bones back to life, He could do the same for you. Thank you for joining me today. I'd love to know which lesson spoke to you the most. Comment below. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share to encourage someone who needs hope. And remember to subscribe for more powerful Bible lessons every week. See you in the next video.